are your recollections of that night? And thinking back, was Boston, Massachusetts the best place to have that match?
Oh, my God, I'd have rather had it in a fucking iron lung, as Chief Jay Strongbow used to say, instead of had it in Boston. And it's not knocking Boston, but I got to back up. In 1993, we became the only wrestling promotion before or since, and this record will never be broken, to have our tag team championship defended on two different companies' pay-per-views. Since Bill Watts had been running WCW and obviously had a relationship with Watts, we started a talent trade arrangement where Bobby Eaton and Arn Anderson came from there up to Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and where I sent some guys like Paul Orndorff had been working for me. I sent him down to work for Bill Watts. And we ended up on Super Brawl that year with the Rock and Roll Express versus the Heavenly Bodies in Asheville, North Carolina. And that match tore the house down because it was Asheville, North Carolina, and they were obviously, not only were the Rock and Roll Express huge there, so was myself and Bobby and Stan. We were right next to the Smoky Mountain territory, so people could get our TV if they tried. And plus, it was a wrestling crowd. And then, of course, Watts left. I didn't trust anybody else in TBS, so we left also, and that deal was over. And then it was just a few months later that I got a call from Bruce Pritchard, Tom's brother. He was working in the WWF. He had seen a tape, long story short, wanted to know if we'd come up and make a few shots. They had an ulterior motive in mind in that they wanted me to manage Yokozuna because they wanted Yokozuna and Lex Luger to have a big program, and unfortunately, Mr. Fuji was a great veteran wrestler, but not exactly a great command of the English language, and they needed somebody to talk for Yoko. So off the Heavenly Bodies went to the WWF, and we wrestled the Steiners for the WWF Tag Team title at SummerSlam in Detroit, which is another great old wrestling town, and had a great match with the Steiners. Actually, I believe it was called the highlight of SummerSlam 93. Look it up on the network if you people get a chance out there. Great match with them. Then I said, what about if I bring the Rock and Roll Express up to the WWF, asked Vince McMahon this, and we have a match for the Smoky Mountain Tag Team titles, because the Rock and Roll Express is the most popular babyface team, biggest box office team that your competition, Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA, ever had, so you can have them on pay-per-view. He said, that's a great idea, pal. And we, at that point, became the only company ever to have our tag team title defended on WCW and WWF pay-per-views, much less the same calendar year. But the problem was it was in Boston. Boston had never been an NWA town. Boston had never seen the Rock and Roll Express live. Well, we went there a couple of times, but not really, back in the 80s. Boston was not a wrestling town. It was a WWF town. And we went out there and had, if you turn the sound down, a tremendous tag team match. It was great. It probably was even better than the one we had in Asheville. And the people sat on their hands, and I couldn't believe it. And then then what made me realize I was in the bizarro world is right after we got out of there, they hit the music, and here comes Doink the Clown and three midgets dressed like clowns, too, and the people roared. I said, all right, we got too far out of here. This is fucked up. If they want to see that shit, we ain't got nothing for them, and I didn't ever want to go back there again. And I like Boston for the food, and there's some fine fans in Boston, but they weren't there at Survivor Series that night because they saw a wrestling match and shit on it, and they cheered three fucking midget clowns and a normal-sized clown. It was fucking sad. But that's what the WWF did, unfortunately.